In this video, I'm going to show you how to use Blender for beginners. This video is going to show you how to go from knowing nothing about Blender to knowing as much as you need to know to start making your first simple models. You might have found this video just by searching how to learn Blender, or you might be here from one of my other videos. So whichever you are, I hope you find this helpful, and if you do, leave a like. But let's get right to it. If you don't already have Blender installed, you can just go to blender.org and download it. If you go to blender.org, you'll see here Blender comes up, and you've got the new version. You can download it, or click the download button up here. And then once you downloaded it, you just go and download it as you do any software, and then it should look like this. I'm going to show you now basically how to get started and learning this great software. So let's get right to it. So what we're going to do here is, as you see, you've got this kind of workspace, and instantly what you see on screen, there's a lot of stuff. There is a lot of stuff you see, and it can be quite overwhelming. However, you need to ignore a lot of it. A lot of it means absolutely nothing to start with. You don't need to know this stuff. However, one thing that's quite important is on the left, you can see we've got a few options here. So we have the select box, which is you can kind of like drag a box by holding left click and dragging a box, and this will select whatever's in that box. And then there is cursor, and this basically, you see that 3D cursor, this little dot is called the 3D cursor, and you can basically just move that around. The next one is the move tool. You can use this to move objects around your workspace. I'm going to be getting to more of this stuff soon. So of course we also have the rotate tool, we have the scale tool, and we have the transform tool. These tools I'm going to be getting to very soon. Here's the annotate tool. You don't really need this, really. I'm going to be honest. You can just kind of like draw. But yeah, you don't really need that. And then you have the measure tool. Again, something you're not going to actually need in most cases. However, if you want to ever use a measuring tool, it's there. And the last one is add cube. And I clicked it, and you can, I guess, add a cube. See, I've not even used this before. I guess this adds stuff where you want it. I don't know. Oh, yeah, it does. Yeah, you don't need all this stuff. I'll be showing you how to do this a lot easier. So to get started, your Blender should look something like this. And to get started, you guys probably don't know how to move. If you don't know how to move around Blender, that's probably the first thing I should cover. So to move, you basically just need to press down your scroll wheel. So press down your scroll wheel and move your mouse, and you can kind of like rotate around this center pivot point. I don't know whether you can kind of see here. You can sort of like move around. And of course, if you want to move over more towards the right, you can just do shift and press your scroll wheel down and kind of move along. And that's one way you can move. So you can kind of like move along like this. And last but not least, you can zoom forward with your scroll wheel, like scroll forward, or you can scroll back just like that. So this, putting these movement methods together, you can kind of see I can look around this cube and get all the angles I will want by using these movement pieces. Honestly, it takes a lot of practice. It honestly takes like 3 weeks or so to actually get used to this, especially if you used old versions of Blender. This is a bit different, but yeah, it'll take you a while to get used to it, but trust me, it is definitely not as hard as you think once you get used to it. And yeah, that's about it for the movement. Now we're going to get to the more modeling aspects. So to do that, we're going to go and first cover kind of like deleting, because you have 3 things in your scene whenever you create a new file. So you can see here over in the collection, you can see everything you've got in your scene here. And what we have is we have a light. So if you want to hover over that and click it, you can click, and you see here the light will come up in the collection. That's the light. On the left here is the camera as well, and then here we have a cube. This is the default cube. You may have heard of it. It's quite famous, but basically you have these things here come in by default. You might want to delete them. First, we're going to start by deleting the light and camera, because we're probably not going to be doing much rendering. So to delete that, you can either press the delete key on your keyboard, or you can press the X key and then click delete. Delete's just a bit faster, but if you don't have a delete key on your keyboard, you can always just do X and then delete. And now we are left with this guy, the default cube. Let's go here, and what we're going to do is we're actually going to delete this guy as well. So I'm going to use the left click, hovering over it, and then delete. Delete. The cube's gone now. The cube is gone. But we want to add a new shape back. So there are 2 ways you can add a new shape. Shapes are called objects or meshes, whatever you want to call them. But we can go here up to the top of the screen, top left, and click add. Go to add, and there's a load of options here. We're just going to do mesh. We just need a simple mesh. You don't need any of these fancy things just yet. So we're going to go mesh, and then you can pick one. So let's start by doing a cube here. So if you want to add a cube, that's what we just had. And one thing I'll show you here now as well is in the bottom left corner, there is this little menu where it says add cube. You can click on that, and it will pop up with a bunch of like stuff you can change. So you got the size, you can always make it bigger, make it smaller, but you can do this anyway without doing it this way. But this is just something you can do with meshes, and you can also change the locations, but that's not important. So we're going to press delete, and now what we'll do is we're going to do Shift A to add a mesh. We're going to this time add a cylinder. Let's do a cylinder, and again this menu might be down here, but if you click on it, it'll pop up. And this one you got a bit more kind of like flexibility, so you can change the vertices. The vertices are it's basically just how many points there are, how many edges on this cylinder. So if I make this really high, you can kind of see it adds more, and if I make it really low, it goes a lot more less details, I guess. But to do that, you can just like click on this and hold down your click and move your mouse, or you can just click on it and type a number. Let's go 14. You can see, and now what there is 14 edges on this cylinder. And again, let's just delete this. We'll do it with X this time, so X and then delete. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do Shift A, mesh, and then you can go to UV sphere. This is another mesh you can add, and it's quite a cool one. Adds a nice sphere. And again, you can change the amount of segments and rings. The segments are basically how many lines there are going down, and rings are how many lines are going across. So you can see here, if I make this thing segment, say 14, and I make rings 8, you can see there's a lot less rings and segments here. And the reason that you'd want to do this is if you've got too many kind of points, they're called vertices, but you've got too many points, too many tries and stuff like this, you can see how there's a bunch more faces now. This is actually not too good. Your game will lag if you put this into your game, and that is not good. For animation, you can get away with higher face counts and stuff. However, it'll just increase render time. But when you're doing real-time stuff like gaming and all that kind of thing, you need to make sure that you've got those poly counts as low as they can be. So you can often just go and just make it quite low, because I'm going to show you a trick later to make this look smooth. I'm going to show you a trick to make this look smooth, even though it's not. But anyway, that's about it for Object Edition. Let's just delete this. So now you know how to add objects to your scene. Now what I'm going to show you is some more basics when it comes to modeling. So we're going to do Shift A here. I forgot to tell you this. Shift A adds a mesh. So if you do Shift A on your keyboard, and it brings up the add menu, instead of having to go add up here, you can just do Shift A, comes up, mesh, and then what we will do is we will do a cube. A cube is a nice easy one to demonstrate on, so let's just go with a cube. And what we're going to do is we are going to show you the different tools in action. So these tools over here can all be used here. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the move tool. So we are going to, you can like get the move tool on and just move it along. You can just move it over here. So for example, you want it over here, we'll move over here. And yeah, you can see it is now moved over here. You can also move it on all the axis and stuff like that. Or you can click in the middle. So you'd have to click on the specific ones. You can click in the middle and kind of like move it freely. But that sometimes gets a bit messy. Now we're going to go over to the rotate tool. Another way you can move is actually by pressing the G key. And this will freely move it. And if you don't want to freely move it, so you see here where you can like move it along there. One way you can do this is you can press G to move and Y to move it along the Y axis. And the way you can know the axis, you learn this over time with experience, but in Blender and most other softwares is similar color coordination schemes. Green is the Y axis, X is the red axis, and then you can't see here the Z axis, but the Z axis is blue. And if you want to learn, like you want a reminder, come up here in the top corner and you can see there's the Z, Y, and X, and the different colors up to what they mean. So basically what I can do here is I can press G to move and X to move along the X axis, or G and Z to move along the Z axis. And this way you don't even need to be in the movement mode. So if I go over here to box select, I often model without using these different modes here. I just use box select and then just do like G to move and then X to move on the X axis, GZ, GY, and you don't need to have that faffy little like kind of like movement thing. It just gets really annoying. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go and show you the rotate mode. So the rotate mode is just below the move mode. And as you can see here, there is the red one. You can spin on that X axis. You can do the Y one, the green one, and spin on the Y axis. And you can do the blue one, which is spinning it on the Z axis. As you see now, this cube has now been rotated. But just like movement, there is a keyboard shortcut. You can press R to rotate, and this will kind of rotate it dependent on the view you're looking at. So if you want to rotate it on a specific axis, just press a key like X, and this will rotate it on the X axis. You can kind of see when I do that, it kind of like puts that line through it, showing you where the axis is, the point that you're pivoting it around. And you do, of course, GY, and you can do, of course, RY, and RZ to kind of like spin it around that axis. And that is that. Let's get on to the scaling. I'm going to move the cube back to the middle here, just so that it's a bit easier to scale without it warping too much. And what we're going to do here is, so you go to the scale tool, and you'll see again, what you can do here is you can scale on one axis. So I can do the y-axis here and just kind of like stretch it along. I could do the x-axis, stretch it along, and I can do the z-axis by doing it like this. And as you see, that scales it up. However, again, a keyboard shortcut. Guess what it is in the comments? Guess what is the keyboard shortcut for this? Well, in fairness, the movement one being G is a bit random, but rotate R, of course, scale is S. So S will scale it just like this. It'll just kind of go bigger and smaller. But of course, you can do S and then Z to scale on that Z axis, S and then X to scale on that X axis, and then S and then Y to scale on that Y axis. It's all going to get very simple the more you model. And this transform tool, you don't really need. It's if you want like all the options at once, but you can be in box select mode and still have all the options at once. You can just do G to move, R to rotate, S to scale. And basically that is how you kind of work with your objects. Also, if you're ever stuck and you've, say for example, you've added a cube and then you've added a cylinder. And say for example, you don't want this cylinder anymore, but you don't want to delete it or whatever. Or say you've moved something over here, but you want it back here. You can undo that. So to undo, you do Control Z. So if I do Control Z, and then I can do it again, and you'll see it actually shrinks the cylinder back down, and it basically undoes all the movements you've done. And if you like go like, oh, well, I actually don't want to undo that, I want to redo it, you can do Control Shift Z. Press it, and as you see, it redoes what you've done. So Control Z, undo, and Control Shift Z is redo. Another thing that is extremely helpful, not so much right now, but it'll be helpful in edit mode, which is what I'm about to show you, is the different kind of like view modes. So right now you can see here in the top right corner, these are the 4 modes. Right now, the one that's blue is solid mode. This is the one that we are in. On the left is wireframe mode, and as you see, wireframe mode just shows you the wireframe of everything in your scene. So wireframe mode shows you everything in your scene, and then over here, there's 2. This is the material preview mode. This one, if you've got textures and stuff on your models, it will show them. And this one on the far right is the render preview mode. Don't use the material preview and render preview unless you're trying to either view your materials or you're trying to render something, because honestly, those things just lag. Especially if you're on a lower end like device, you're going to struggle to use those modes because they just lag a little bit too much. But anyway, that is that. Now that I've shown you that, it's time to show you edit mode. Edit mode is a revolutionary thing. If you've just tried building stuff with objects here, say for example you want to make a house and you just use cubes just like this, and you're kind of just making some houses and stuff like this, edit mode is just a whole new world, right? Edit mode is just crazy. So let's delete these, and we will do Shift and A, add a mesh, and we're going to add a cylinder. And you can come down to the vertices here. Of course, it's popped down, click on it, and we'll change it to something like 8. So we'll do 8, nice low poly cylinder, just so it's easy to demonstrate here everything that's going on. So how to get into edit mode? Make sure you have your object selected. So if you've got nothing selected, then it'll look like this. But if you want something selected, I would personally either click on the model, or you can click over here in the collection, just click on one. And now you'll see it has this like orange glow, this outline. That is what you want. And to go into edit mode, you can either press Tab on your keyboard, the little tab key on the left, or you can just come up here to the top left corner where it says object mode, and then go to edit mode. And as you see, it's now gone and gotten these like dots all over it, and everything's yellow. So if you want to deselect everything, so right now because it's yellow, it's all selected, you can just do Alt A on your keyboard, and Alt A deselects everything. A selects everything, Alt A deselects everything. So yeah, that's a pretty handy shortcut to know. And now everything's deselected. You can kind of see this a lot better now, how you've got all these dots. So this is it in object mode, and this is it in edit mode. What we're going to do here is we can actually move each individual point, and this is how you're going to create really complex shapes. So this is what we're going to do here. So if you want to move, say, this vertice out here, you click on it like I just did then, it'll light up orange, and then you can press G to move. And as you see, that's moved it all the way over here. But that's a bit random. So what we're going to do here is we are going to try and make this top face. I don't really see it's kind of like this top bit. We're going to try and make this bigger than the bottom to kind of like create a cone sort of look. You can either do this one of 3 ways. 3 ways I would suggest you do this. You can either use the box select tool up here, just like that, and it'll select them all, or you can go and click one and then hold Shift hold shift and click this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. Basically, when you hold shift, it will accumulatively select, you know, more and more. So you just click on here and then you click again. You'll see it keeps kind of like clicking the next one, and you're kind of using this chase, trying to select the next one. So you just hold shift, click 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. There we go. As you see, that was fairly fast, and we've got them all selected. Last but not least, though, this is a strategy that will help you a lot, especially if you've got a bunch of vertices everywhere and you can't use the box select because you might select something else. What you can do is you can just put your mouse over the line, so you can kind of see this line following around. You can kind of put your mouse on the line and hold Alt on your keyboard and then click, and that will select the whole loop. It's really cool, and you can use it on the bottom as well. If I hold over the line and do Alt and then click, you'll see it kind of like selects the loop. So go do that, Alt and then click the loop. Do whichever way suits you, but I'll definitely say Alt will save you a lot of time in the future. And now to make this bigger, we can do it one of two ways. I'm sure you know now, there is the scale tool right here. And as you see, we can just, oh, not like that. If you select this middle ring, it should let you scale just like that. So you can scale it down, or scale it up. I don't like that though, personally. I prefer using the S key. So go, and I'm going to go to box select mode, and you can do S to scale it down or scale it up. So we're going to scale it down here, I think. Go something like that. And as you see, we've now got like a coney kind of shape. And yeah, that's how you'd use like the scale tool. Maybe if you want to select this again, you can do G to move it and Z to move on the Z axis. You know, you want to move it down or move it up. Or you can maybe use the Y axis, move it Y or move it X. But I'm going to keep it in the center here. And if you want to rotate it again, you can always rotate that. And yeah, if that's the kind of shape you're looking for. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to show you some new tools. As you see here, there's a bunch of stuff on the left. You don't need all these. I would experiment with them if I was you. You know, as you improve with Blender, try and learn what more and more of these do. However, for now, as a beginner, just try and learn the basic tools. And I'm going to show you them here. And next what we're going to do is we are going to go down here and we're going to kind of like try and round off the bottom. Because right now in object mode, she's got quite a harsh bottom. So we're going to go into edit mode here and we are going to Alt select this loop here. And as you see, it's gone gold. And we're going to show you a new shortcut. We're going to be using bevel. And you can always use the bevel tool down here. However, I personally prefer the shortcut Control B. So if we do Control B here, you'll see that we can move our mouse to kind of like move how much the bevel kind of affects it. And we can also scroll. So if you scroll forwards on your wheel, it adds more loops. If you scroll backwards, it adds less. So the minimum is like this, just 1. And then you can add more, and you can go as high as you want, but don't go too high because it will lag your PC. So I'm going to like a nice little round bevel, something like that. And to confirm it, just do left click. And as you see, that's applied it. And now I am free to move my mouse and everything is good. Next, what I'm going to show you is the extrude tool. So we're going to go back up to the top here and we're going to do Alt and then select this. And as you see, we have now got this loop selected. Of course, you can box select or select them one by holding shift. And now we've got them selected. We are going to extrude. To extrude, you can use this tool here and kind of like add. However, I prefer just using the E key. So if I go and press E, it will move it up and we can go somewhere about here. And now we've extruded that. Pretty cool. Now I'm going to show you another tool. Sorry if this is getting overwhelming, guys, by the way. I'm just want to try and cram as much into this video as I can without making it too long. What we're going to do now is we are going to press the I key. And you can also use this tool here, the Inset Faces tool, and you can kind of like move it inwards. And this basically creates another loop within the face. So you can press the I key and kind of like move your mouse to adjust how far in you want this. And there we go something like that. And as you see, we've got a new loop within there. And now you can just mix up these tools. These are the main tools you're going to need. So perhaps you want to extrude this up. So do E to move it up. And perhaps this edge is a bit hard for you. So you can do Control B and kind of like, you know, create a nice bevel there and soften it all up. And I do not know what I'm trying to make right now. It's just a random shape from a cylinder. Another trick as well you might want to use. So if you want this to get bigger at the top, just Alt select this loop. And you can do something where you press E to extrude. And don't press anything else. You don't need to left click. You can just press S right away. And this will scale that extrusion. And there you see now, I've got this, but you've got some like Z fighting. So if you press E again, it'll extrude it up and that will now fix it. And as you see, we've now created like another bit at the top. I'm going to show you one more thing here where we can shade this smooth so that it doesn't look like it's got these hard edges. And the way you can do this is by pressing Tab. And then when you're in edit mode, so you've got to be in edit mode here, press A to select everything. And then go up to the top here and do face and then shade smooth. And you see it gets these kind of like weird dark patches and the whole thing looks a bit mushy. And you don't want that. You don't want your mesh to start looking all mushy like this. So to fix this, come over to this little green triangle down here on the right. This is object data properties. Now go to the normals tab. So click the little down arrow on normals and then tick auto smooth. And as you see, this kind of looks a bit like it did before, where it kind of had that that hard edge look. And this just depends on how many kind of vertices you have here. So, you know, you can always have like more vertices. If you made the cylinder more detailed, of course you wouldn't have this. However, you can also fix this anyway by, you see this little 30 degrees here. This is the angle at which it smooths. So any angle 30 degrees or less, it will smooth. So we can just change this by either clicking on it and holding, or type a number. I usually type 50 in here because 50 just about gets those kind of like harsh edges smoothed as you'd want them. And I think this looks a lot better. And that's about it for the simple modeling techniques. You can genuinely make almost anything using these techniques. If you spend long enough tweaking them and kind of like messing with your model, you can make a lot of things. However, for those of you trying to just expand that little bit more, you might want to stop here in the video and kind of start making some more stuff yourself. Or you might want to go and watch the rest of the video, and I'm going to teach you a few more slightly more intermediate tips that will just help you take your work to the next level when you start really trying to make stuff yourself. And what we're going to do here is we are going to be using modifiers. So we're going to do Shift A here, and we're just going to add a plane cube. And what we're going to do here is we've got a cube here, and you want to come over to this little blue wrench. This is the modifiers tab. We're going to be showing you some modifiers here. If you go to the add modifier button, click there, you will see there is a ton of modifiers. You don't need you don't need nowhere near all of these. So you got loads of the deform ones you probably won't use until you kind of get later on trying to do more advanced stuff. Physics, unless you're using animation, you probably won't use much. And the whole modify stuff, you don't always need. You very rarely need. The generate stuff is what you're going to use more of. You'll need a lot of these quite a lot of the time. And the ones I'm going to show you here are going to be just the ones that will help you the most. So as I showed you before, you can always go into edit mode with tab and do Control B with everything selected and kind of like bevel your cube. Or you can do this through a modifier. So add modifier and add a bevel modifier. And as you see, it bevels it. And here in the amount, you can increase that. And that will increase, how much it bevels. And you can also change the segments. And the segments are kind of, again, how many things you get here. I'll show you another one now. So you can just either click on that little cross there to remove the modifier. Or if you want to apply this, because if you see right now, I go into edit mode, you can see it doesn't actually have it there. It's kind of weird. It doesn't... if you've never used Blender before, you'll be confused that your bevel, you don't have all the vertices there. You can't see them. So to fix this, you can just click on the little down arrow and do apply. And this will now apply the modifier. And as you see, we've got all the different vertices here, and that's how you'd want it. However, if you don't want this, you're not happy with how it looks, you can click the little cross and it'll go. I'm going to show you a new modifier now in the modifiers tab. So add modifier and subdivision surface. What this does is it basically adds more vertices and more edges and stuff relative to what you've got where. And as you see, it's kind of made the cube a circle, and that's because we are using Catmull-Clark. This is one of the subdivision surface modes, and this one is actually very helpful for kind of creating some nice rounded kind of objects, and it can just help with modeling more complex animals. If you don't want to do sculpting, you can always use subdivision surface and kind of try and create those more organic kind of shapes by using this. However, if you just want to add more vertices, you can use simple mode. As you see, it looks like nothing changed, and if you go into edit mode, it looks like nothing changed. However, if I click the down arrow and do apply, you'll see it actually did. It added more vertices, and that's what subdivision surface does. It basically just subdivides your model. And so Catmull-Clark is probably the most helpful one, and in the levels viewport, that is basically how many times it subdivides it. So right now it's on 1, and then you can do type 2, or you can click and drag. You don't want to go too high because it gets really laggy because it multiplies more and more and more. But as you see here, it kind of adds more and more, and it creates that really smooth circle look. And this can get really helpful when you go into edit mode and do tab, so tab to edit mode, and you can start trying to add more vertices. So if you start extruding up and stuff, it starts creating some really nice shapes. You can adjust everything, kind of start creating some rather weird and wacky shapes. And there we go. That's about it for subdivision surface. It's a very handy tool, but you probably won't use it until further down the line. I'm going to show you another modifier, which is extremely helpful when you're trying to make certain objects. We're going to delete the cube here, and say, for example, you do Shift A and add a mesh, you add a plane, and then you see here on this plane, in a game engine, everything is only going to show one side, unless you kind of in the game engine tell it to do something otherwise. So for example, Roblox Studio, you can tick double-sided, but basically, you can see here, this thing is literally just one face. This thing is one face, so that means one side is going to be invisible. And if you want to fix this, so select your object, go to add modifier and add a solidify modifier. click on it, and as you'll see, it'll make it slightly thicker. And you see here in the settings, you can change the thickness, and you can thicken it quite a lot. You can do a nice thickness, and it is pretty cool. So yeah, that is that. Let's delete this modifier. We'll delete the whole object, and we are now going to add another cube. So if I go to cube, I'm going to show you another really handy modifier, especially if you want to make symmetrical shapes. So you want to make something symmetrical, go to add modifier, and you can add a mirror modifier. And what the mirror modifier will do is, if you go into edit mode here with tab, and you can use Z to go into wireframe, like I showed you, you can do G and X. You can do G and X, and this will kind of like move it. And as you see around this kind of like center point, it will mirror it. And this is really helpful when you're trying to create something symmetrical. So you see here, if I want to do like G, if I do G, you'll see it kind of like moves them both, and they are both symmetrical. And yes, that is that. And the last modifier I am going to show you here is skin. And this one is quite a niche one. You won't use this one much, but it's quite cool for creating some like nice low poly tree trunks and stuff, or maybe even creating characters. So the way we're going to do this is we are going to do Shift A to add a mesh. We're going to add a plane, and then we're going to go Tab to go into edit mode. And what you can do in edit mode is you can do delete. And then in the delete mode, in edit mode, you get a lot more options. You can either delete vertices, delete edges, delete faces, delete only edges and faces, delete only faces, or you can dissolve vertices, edges, faces, limited dissolve, collapse edges and faces, or edge loops. So what we're going to do here is we are going to do collapse edges and faces. And what this does is it takes everything you want to delete, so everything you have selected, and it will put them all into one vertice. So what this means is, like, you know, here, this is going to make all these 4 vertices into one. You can't see it right now, but if I press G, you'll see there's one vertice there. And if I go tab to go out of edit mode, you can't really tell if you're in or out of edit mode because the origin of the object is kind of like giving it away. It's kind of like covering the vertice. But what we can do is you can just look up here in the top corner, it says object mode, and you'll see it says edit mode when you're in edit mode. So what we're going to do is here, go into object mode, go to add modifier, and we are going to add a skin modifier. Actually, it just seems like it's making it a cube here. However, we're going to go tab to go into edit mode. Make sure you have your vertice selected. So you can just click on it. And then we're going to do E to extrude. And as you see, this is adding kind of like a vertice. And what the skin modifier is doing is, without it, so to unview it, you can just delete it, or you can press this little TV thing. This just kind of like turns it off. So this is what our mesh looks like. But with the skin modifier, we can turn it back on, you will see it's kind of adding these different things. It's kind of cool. So what you can do here is you can kind of like create some weird, funky shapes. And another thing that is really handy is you can select a vertice. So we're going to do Z to go into wireframe. And you are going to click, and we can do Control A. Control A will make it bigger or smaller. So if I go out of wireframe, we can do Control A to make it big, and we maybe select this one, do Control A to make it small, and you can kind of just create some really funky shapes, and it's kind of cool. So this is how you'd make something like maybe like a tree trunk. You could do it like this, and that is about it for the modifiers. So let's just add a cube here, and I'm going to demonstrate some viewport shading stuff. So we've got a cube here, and what we're going to do here is this only works in solid mode, I believe. Everything has its own different viewport shading settings, but the one I'm going to show you now is just, you just need really the solid mode ones, because they're what kind of make the biggest difference. As you see right now, the cube is looking very kind of like colorless. I don't know, the color of it, I hate the color of the default cube with the default Blender settings. However, what we're going to do here is we're going to go over to where we were before, and you can see here that we've got solid mode on. Click the little down arrow, and this gives us so many settings. And you got here Studio, Matte Cap, and Flat. So Studio kind of tries to add some shading and depth. Matte Cap allows you to go here and click on this ball and choose one of many matte caps. It's really cool for certain types of modeling. And Flat just creates a very flat look. But I do sometimes like to model with this one because it's just got a bit more color to it. And the reason that there's no depth right now, I will show you a way to add some. So you can go back to Studio by default if you like, and then coming down in the color option, there's a few. So you can either have Material, which is the default one. You got Object, Attribute, Single, Random, and Texture. Texture will basically mean if you've got like a material applied, like an image texture, it will basically pass through. So in object mode, you don't actually have to use the material preview mode. You can preview it by using the texture setting here. And random's always cool if you've got a bunch of stuff in your scene. It will basically give it all a random color. I don't know if this has got, yeah, you can see they've got random colors right now. So you can kind of see it picks a random color. So if you've got a bunch of shapes, you have a load of different colors, which is pretty cool. I usually use texture mode when I am modeling just because I often use textures and stuff. However, material is always good enough. And if you come down here now, there is a lot more settings. You know, theme, world, or viewport, but I just use theme, the default one. And this is where we're going to start to get a little more depth and just kind of like making your stuff look a lot better. So we click the little down arrow again. You can come here, and the two that I use the most are shadow and cavity. And what shadow does is it kind of adds a few more shadows and stuff. This will cause a bit more lag, but if you've got the kind of like capacity on your PC, it won't add much more lag, and it's good. It's always going to make your models look better, and cavity really makes those edges glow. This doesn't affect anything. If I export this model right now, having these settings changed won't do anything to my final model. However, it will just kind of like make it modeling a bit easier, because sometimes without these, everything can look a bit flat, and you can sometimes lose kind of like where the edges are and stuff. With these on, it's a lot easier to kind of see where the edges are. And what you can do is you can actually adjust the settings. So you can see right now the type is on screen, and you can kind of adjust the ridge and valley. However, if you change screen to world, you get more options to kind of like adjust it a bit. And what I usually use is both, and it allows you to adjust like each of them. You can kind of change the ridge, the valley, the ridge and the valley to kind of like get that look you're going for when modeling. And this just allows you to kind of like have Blender looking just a little bit nicer. Next, I'm going to show you another tab that is going to have a bunch of handy features. So what we're going to do here is we're going to click this little down arrow next to this kind of like two circles. Click the down arrow, and here there is a bunch of options. Loads of them are turned on. This is overwhelming. I personally wouldn't mess with this too much, because you don't want to accidentally change something and not forget it, because Control-Z does not work on these settings. But you can go and do statistics, and what this will show you here is on the left, it'll pop up this, and it basically shows you how many objects are in your scene. As you see, it tells us we have 6, because we have all 6 of these cubes, and it has like 6 out of 6 or 1 out of 6 to 1 out of 6, and then you can like highlight a few, and you can see it tells you how many you have selected. And here it says the vertices. So the vertices is how many vertices you have in your scene. As you see before, you know, we've got the vertices here. So you can see if I select everything, you can see that all the different dots, they're vertices, so there's 48. Edges are just how many edges are in your scene, and then faces are how many faces you've got in your scene. And that is that. There's one more thing I'm going to show you here, which is super helpful for making sure your models don't have any problems. And that is flipped normals. So if you go here and go back to where we tick statistics, tick face orientation. This isn't something you want on all the time, unless you like the blistering blue. This is something you only want to have on when you're checking for normals, usually when you've finished a model. So if I delete this, everything here, and do Shift A, we will add let's add a sphere, right? So we've got a sphere here, you can see it's all blue. However, if we go on the inside, it should all be red. So each face has two sides. It has the red side and the blue side. The red side is invisible. As I told you before, in a game, only one side shows. As you hear, the top side of this plane shows, the bottom side doesn't. So when we add a solidifier, so go to add to modifier and add a solidify modifier, it makes everything blue because it kind of like finishes off the mesh, if that makes sense. As you see on the inside, it will all be red. So basically, if your models ever import to Roblox Studio and have invisible faces, so for example here, I have a cylinder and some of the faces might be red. So if I want to make them red, I can do Alt N flip. And this is a flipped normal. This is called a flipped normal. To fix this, it's super easy. You can either go into edit mode and you select everything and do Alt N and then recalculate outside. This is where Blender will basically try and calculate where like the inside of the mesh is and make sure all the normals are facing outwards. However, this doesn't always work. So say for example, you just have like a few outside here that are flipped. You can just select them and just do Alt N flip, and this will just flip them the other way around. This is a super easy way to fix it. Do not worry. This is really easy and it's not always that big of a problem. But sometimes you'll have it in Roblox Studio and it'll have holes and you won't know why. That is why. So I'm going to turn this off here. And honestly, as for the basics, that is all you need to know. I had a few other things I wanted to go through in this video, but it's already like half an hour long. And honestly, I don't want to give you guys like an hour-long video. Let me know if you want a part 2 where I can go through those things. Some of those things include texturing, importing reference imagery, just the kind of like material system in Blender, UV editing, and stuff like that. Let me know if that's something that appeals to you. I have a few videos on some of them already on my channel. So let me know if you want more videos kind of like going through stuff like UV unwrapping and stuff like that. I hope this video really did help you kind of understand Blender better. Check out some of my other videos. I'll put a video on screen right now, how to make a chest model if you want to make a chest. So yeah, check that out. Thank you for watching. Hopefully I will see you in my next video.